Hello, welcome to another edition of Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 160, 160 weeks of great content for August 23rd, 2024. And today we're going to talk about secrets of load user plus, well, anything else you want to talk about. I am Dale Warner, head of support for Plant and App, joined by technical success manager Patrick Anderson from Plant and App, and well, all of you. This is an event we do every week to talk about Plant and App and low coding and the intricacies of getting that done and done right. So we invite you to participate, to show, to tell, to talk about your challenges and maybe get something solved while you're here. We record all these and put them on YouTube. So we encourage you to subscribe to youtube.com/plantandapp. We'll run this agenda. We do this pretty loosely, but same agenda every week. We do introductions and then go around the campfire. And we always start with first call and anything that you've submitted. I usually bring one or two things to talk about, and then we can get into any of these other things. But after an hour or so, we'll go into our afterglow segment. That's where we just turn off the recording, enjoy each other on a personal level for a little while longer. So do engage with us. Jump in. You can show and tell, share your screen, use the chat window, but most importantly, get involved. You can submit questions and topics in advance, either through using this QR code to a Google form, or you can email support directly, support@plantandapp.com. Hello, team.
Hi.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, did anyone come with something that you'd like to put first?
I did.
Well, Tom, jump in, please do.
Great. Um, I was testing out APIs, first time actually doing so. And the overall need for it is we're making an app. A client has a EasyDNN system where they have events, and the app was meant to create a list of events for the app by calling an API that basically goes into SQL and pulls from the EasyDNN news table. So that's the need that we had. I had written a very simple API that once you call it, it goes to SQL, grabs the few items into a list, and then sends out a response. So you'll basically get a JSON of the list of events, articles that are in the database. Here's the problem. The first problem was that I was using the wrong thing. I was using the do a SQL query, and that doesn't generate a JSON list. So I asked Dale, and Dale, you told me about using get list from SQL, and I changed it, and everything was great. But what it gave you was just the list. It didn't give you the JSON at the beginning where, quote, event list, colon, and then the actual JSON in the brackets. It just gives you the brackets part. And my app developer says, could you give me the whole thing? So then I went to your Planet App Cafe where you talk about APIs and looked where you did a raw response and you put the brackets. I think you had product list, colon, and then product list JSON, which was great, except here's the problem. Planet App is telling me that is not a token that it found. And I've not seen that before. Here it is. I've got two actions, one after the other. The first action is go get a list from SQL. The list name is event list. It's right there. It's obvious. The next line is a raw response where it's bracket, quote, event list, colon, and then bracket, event list, colon, JSON. And it says that's not a token.
All right. Well, I can let's dig in on that a little bit. So I've got an API. I mean, we just kind of walk through one and see if something rings a bell. So we've got an API here. I'm just going to call it Campfire 160, and I'm going to set it up as a get API. For this purpose, I'm not going to have any input parameters so far. So this is just always going to, let's say our API is called Campfire 160 users. I'm going to give a nice user list back by way of JSON. I don't have events, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to return back all the users. So one way to do it would be to add an action that is SQL based. So load users from SQL. And so this is the one that you ended up going to. And so we can say, for example, select ID and user name from users. So this will give a list of users, and the
That's not building a list, is it? The load users?
wow, I'm an entirely wrong action. So
Yeah, well, you said we were going to talk about load users, so
and we will, but
Yeah,
so let's
yeah,
just
that's
put that
good.
aside and try
yeah,
again.
I
The
think that's
action
where
that
your head was.
well, it's just the first one I picked on. We
Yeah,
want to create list from uh,
right.
we want to create list from SQL. That's the action that we were
Yeah,
trying
that's
to.
the one I'm using too.
All right, so let me make sure I've gotten rid of, so I've got this other one flagged for deletion, so we can close that up, and we're going to create list from SQL. Okay, so now I'm on the same planet as you. So we're going to select some data and come out with a user list. That's the output name of the thing, and that's all we're going to do. So this is going to give
Exactly.
us a user list. Great. So then the question is, once we get it, what do we do with it? So there are, in addition to the add actions, there's add responses. This is where we can send output. And let's first try what you were working with, and then there might be some other ones that, so I think you were using raw response. Is that
Yeah, my
correct?
first time was existing list, and that gave the list, but it didn't put the thing in brackets and call it event list colon and then give the list. It
Okay.
gave just the array.
All right.
So
Well,
that's the
let's
first one.
start where you started. So we'll do, um, we created user list here, which I'll copy. We will output it here. This is the absolute very simplest thing. And I think we'll get to a nice uh, answer for you before we're done. All right. So if we save and test this, what did it not do? What did it not like? This is what the problem was. Save and test. Patrick, any suggestions?
Did you name everything and all that on the first tab? I think you went right to actions. What was on the? Oh, yeah, okay. The Git. Yep.
Have no inputs. We have an N action. We're outputting user list. Well, that's disturbing.
In the users table, isn't it user ID instead of ID?
Well,
Hmm.
it is,
It should
but
be giving us that error, but yeah.
uh,
So when the error pops up at the bottom on my screen, I'm not seeing it. Is that the same as everyone else? Or is it actually providing an error, but a blank error message?
I'm sorry. When the error pops up for me, it is blank.
Yeah.
There is
Got it. Yes.
This is a bad error.
Which, yeah,
I'm on an experimental. My version is a little bit advanced, so I'm going to go back to one that is more stable. I'm going to go to another version and do this work so that we do. I know, maybe do it in Campfire.
yeah, I was about to suggest that too.
I may have had something installed that is causing an issue. So let's validate first. Sorry, it wasn't as straightforward as it should be, but let's try it here. So we'll build this again, maybe build it the right way. So new API, again, we're going to call it Campfire 160. We'll make it be a get. And the action will be a create list from SQL. User ID, user name from users. It's going to give us our user list. I'm going to just start with save and test here. Okay, we're in good shape. It is saving and not breaking. So maybe it was just my experimental version. So now our add response is an output of a existing list as a JSON.
Right. That's the one I was using first.
List name is user list. Let's say 100 OK as a response. Save and test. So when we run it, we get a stack of users, the user ID, username in an array, but you wanted to have another level of this as an output.
Yes, correct. Instead of just the array, it should start with
A header, in your
user
case,
list
an
colon.
event. All right. And so let's turn that one off and try the way you tried it. So this would be an output of a raw response, and you were doing you want an array that looks like
It starts with a curly bracket, quote, user list, colon, or
it doesn't, yeah, we can call it anything.
right.
And then you were trying to output the JSON.
Right.
Okay. And I'm going to jump out here to APIs and look at something else. We have our entity, when you create an API, an entity, and it creates an API for you automatically, we create a raw response that kind of has this format. And so I'm going to cheat and take it from there so that I get the syntax correct. Meaning I'm just, a little bit of copying somebody else's work. Okay, so that we get it right. So
And that's exactly what you have in the Planet App Cafe. I mean, not exact. It's not this
perfect
one. It's product list, but that's the right format.
So I'm going to get rid of that, and then the token that we created was called user list, and we're using a colon JSON. Is that what you were using?
And I'm getting the same error that you're getting. User list token not recognized.
Well, Oh, this is the error that you're concerned with?
Yes.
Okay. So let's ignore the error a moment and save and test and see what we get. All right.
The JSON that should be after user list is not there.
All right. So in the uh, one that we were copying, we were using the read all action. Read all returns as part of its content. Where's the help for this? It tells you that it's going to create an output token named JSON. It's the read all does this. The load SQL, I don't think it does. Let's see if we've got that. Create list from SQL. It creates a count, but it doesn't create a JSON. So
The
that's
create list from SQL does.
it creates a JSON.
Yes.
Why do you say that?
Because when you had the send list, I take that back. Well, that because in the support ticket you said to use this instead of using the SQL query, because the create list creates a JSON, and it was working but now I understand the send list may been the thing that was actually generating the JSON. So that may be what the issue is.
Right. I think what we're encountering, Patrick, if I'm going off the deep end, let me know. But I think what we're encountering is that the create list from SQL creates a list, but not it doesn't automatically create a JSON subtoken you can use.
The list needs to
issue.
be serialized to JSON. That's what we're missing here.
And so like anything else, I think there's a couple of ways to do this, but let's try this. If there is if we go back to what we created in the first place, we're saying send out an existing list as a JSON and we're getting a good answer. It's just not wrapped the way that you want it to be wrapped, right?
Right.
So let's take that and advance. There's another action in the JSON family that is created JSON object. Now I'm believing this to be the right thing. Let's take a moment and find out if we can get it to work. Where we want to create, we'll call it users, and we're going to take the user list and user list is a JSON array, and so it's going to create that as a formatter. Does that look right to you, Patrick? See, I'm throwing you under the bus.
I think so. It's worth a try.
And then we'll re-enable this and use our raw response. And so the thing we're creating is going to be called output. We'll call the output JSON. Just trying to be very obvious what we're doing here. And so when it comes time to output it, we're just going to output the output JSON. So let's see what that does. It's a list. Let's try that. have user list. We're trying to
And that's the format I'm looking for.
okay. So first of all, so A, it works. B, I'm not terribly happy with the way that we pass the value in, because we're passing the name of a token. I guess it wants the name of a token, not the actual token value. So we're passing a user list in. We're telling it is a list that we're passing in. So that's how it knows what to do. So this is a way to wrap it the way that you want it. So create list from SQL, create a JSON object out of the list, and then output it directly. Patrick, in looking at this, do you see another way to wrap that the way he wants to wrap it?
No, I don't. I think that you could probably you could probably also do the formatting in a raw response, but I think this is a better way to handle it. So and did we address did we, I can't remember if we said anything about the error that Don was getting, just to be clear to everybody that what that is and why you said earlier just ignore it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we should go back and just because we could still do a raw response and use the output of the JSON list in a raw response, but I think we should explain why he was seeing that I can, while you're heading towards there, I can go ahead and talk about it. It's basically that's an IntelliSense error. So that's one of the newer features we have in our new admin UI is IntelliSense, and IntelliSense is not perfect yet. Dale was just he was just demonstrating IntelliSense. Basically, IntelliSense is the ability to see tokens that exist and to suggest them to you. So see how he has a list there of things that could be, but it's not perfect yet, and it doesn't see the tokens from all of the actions that are in the context. And so that the token that you were seeing, that it was saying, so a user list token not recognized, it's just saying it doesn't see the user list token, but you can still save it and still use the token if you happen to know that the token is indeed in context.
And so it's a warning, not an error.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for example, if you hover this where it's telling you that there's a, we see the exclamation point here telling you it's an error. It's a warning. So does that warning make sense to you?
It makes sense that it's a warning. It also doesn't make sense that I haven't seen a computer program that says, I think this is wrong. Either it's wrong or don't give me that error and let me stumble across it, stumble along my merry way rather than throwing doubts at me. Because it's if it's the blind leading the blind, that's kind of scary. But I get what it's doing. So just trust that the problem was I was trusting that the action that I was using above was the one that was creating the actual JSON list, and it wasn't. It was the raw the add response that create or output a list, which was generating the actual JSON. I thought it was happening in the create list SQL. So that's what was throwing me off.
Okay, so sorry about I mean, this is a bug, and as Patrick points out, it's our incomplete development, meaning we started providing IntelliSense at one point. If we didn't recognize something, we threw it as an error and wouldn't let you save, which that was inherently annoying. So our intermediate solution is throwing it as a warning and letting you save if you know what you're doing. And you're
Sure.
doing
Now
it
I got
right.
that.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So I'm going to get rid of this, but I wanted to let me save that out. I wanted to point out there, there's always another way to do things, right? And so, for example, this is our base query, and we're getting our action back. There is what is it for JSON is a what's the we've done this so many times. Back to AI to ask this question.
I'm sure Ben's not here today, but he could rattle it off without even looking it up.
He could.
True.
And this was yeah, one of the first things that occurred to me also is that we could use this functionality as well.
Add for JSON to select state
JSON, oh, yeah,
for JSON.
Auto for JSON path. There's a couple of variants, so let's do that. So this wrapped it in an array, but it doesn't give us the preview for JSON auto. What's this do? Same thing. So this is a way to get and there's probably a variation that would, or a way to do it that, let's try this.
Yeah, that's what I would expect.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would have expected that, I think.
Yeah. So there's probably some variation of this that would get you there. But just to review, we did provide a solution, and it's using create JSON object, take your list and format it as a list, and it will and now this gives you the complete control over what the name of the identifier is. So I guess that would be an object or a property. So for example, just to illustrate that you have complete control there over what that is, and then the array gets stored inside of it. So whatever.
Yeah, for me, it's a hunt through the different actions to see what all of the JSON manipulations or actions are. So because this is the one side of it. The second side is after somebody after the app pulls down all of the events and the person quote unquote registers by selecting their options, etc., and paying. The app is going to send back to the database a registration because EasyDNN has registration, and it would put a new registered user record in there. So now I have to do it the opposite. I have to take the JSON that they provide, parse it all, break it all down, and then do a SQL write into the EasyDNN news database.
Okay. So did we get there on your first call?
Thank you. Yes.
Excellent. Good topic. Anyone else come with something you want to talk about before we go into our other agenda? Great. So I did a quick look before we started, I'm paying attention to us getting to version 1.26 that we released it 2 months ago, a little more than 2 months ago. We are at about 16% adoption. So this is the public's, the sites that you have that are, whether they're test or production, we don't really have any insight into that, but we're at about 16% of the 125 sites have been upgraded to 126. Anybody have any 126 commentary? Patrick was very helpful this week, and if you'll tell me if you're ready to share, I'll let you do it, Patrick.
Yeah, sure.
We'll jump in with it.
Okay. This came from a request from Jim, who was on the call, but now he's gone. I would ask him to. I was going to ask him to give a little.
Testimonial?
Yeah, see how it worked out for him. I haven't heard from him, see if it's accomplishing what he needed or not. But basically, we talked about this on a previous campfire, and I finally got back to it to do a little bit more work on it, and it's in a fairly decent state right now. The idea is that we want to put this listing into edit mode, and if data is changed and not saved, we want to warn the user. So you can see here that I can go up here and go to another tab. But if I click on edit user data, I can still do that, and I can leave if I need to. But if I actually make a change in here, if I go up here, you see now that as soon as I start to move out of the viewport, I'm getting a message telling me that I have unsaved changes. And if I continue or close, so I'll continue that, and I'll say save all. And now if I go up here, I don't have the error anymore. So I'm sure that this functionality could be expanded, but it definitely gives the user an indication. It's not going to stop them, so I can still go to another tab, but it does give them a message letting them know that that they have unsaved changes. And I can show you a little bit about how this is set up, but let me just point out one more thing is that so there's there's actions on the save button that will so there's a global variable. That's the first thing. There's a global variable that determines whether or not this is going to this JavaScript is going to show the pop-up, and and there's listeners that are placed on. So when we go into edit data mode, there's listeners placed on each field to see if there's a change. And when there is a change, then it changes the global variable to true, so that when we start to navigate out, it shows us this. And if we cancel, for instance, that cancel has a listener on it that changes the global variable to false. And so now I'm not getting that message anymore. So does anybody have any questions so far? I'll start getting into how this is set up.
Yeah, so just put it another way, the global variable is keeping track of whether or not the page is dirty.
Right, yes.
That it's made, and then.
So the setting, I mean, the setup is fairly complex, but it's all here, and it should be pretty transportable as well. I'm using both the onInit JavaScript and the data source load refresh JavaScript. So when we initialize, we're setting up, first of all, this is the global variable, show exit warning. And we're establishing show exit warning as false. Then we're adding an event listener for the mouse leave. And if show exit warning And this gets a little bit tricky. So obviously I got help, creating all this. But basically this is talking about, where the cursor is. So we're looking at where the cursor actually is on the page. Then if this entire condition here evaluates to true, then we're going to see the pop-up. And you can see at first I was working with just a JavaScript alert, but then I switched it to a pop-up so that we could have interaction that changes things. And so this, if it's true, it shows the pop-up. So this JavaScript is set up on init. This JavaScript here is running when the data source loads and refreshes, and it is setting up the listeners for each of the controls. So this is and there's notes in here. So we're selecting the form controls. So here we go. Doing a selector all of form controls that have inline edit as their class. And then here's where the listeners are being added to each form control. So we're taking the list that we found and going through each one and doing a listener for input. And then if any of the controls has an input, then window.showExitWarning is set to true. So that same global variable that we set up already. And then this is for the, I think, let's see. I think this.
That would be it if the value is changed. Is that what we're seeing?
Yes, that's right, exactly. So the event lister. So if the value, so either we have new input or the value's changed. That's what's happening here. Yep. And then the show exit warning set to true. Okay, so this got a little tricky here. So this is the function that sets up the listeners for each control. But when do we run this function? I tried a lot of different things, and I kept on going back to the same pal that we all are getting help from recently, saying, okay, that's not working. And what I ended up getting back from GPT was something I'd never heard of, mutation observer. So this is basically looking for changes to the content, and when the content changes, then we run the function to add event listeners. So that's what's happening here, and so we are running the set up form control listeners function there, and then the observer.disconnect. So this was not in place originally, and what I noticed was that this was not ending, and it was causing a lot of inputs in the console, and so I went back, and that's why this observer.disconnect is here. So once we successfully set up everything, then we're disconnecting the loop that's set up here. So the observer.observe is what this is what's running this function to look for the mutation. And then this one right here is specifically for the cancel button, because the cancel button was not setting the show exit warning back to false. So that's what this is doing here.
So
yeah,
a question on the mutation observer. We have in our Bootstrap 3, there used to be an on-grid loaded, and is this what you were looking? Would that have helped? Meaning you're looking for when the page stabilizes, I need to add all these listeners.
Yes, and it may have helped, but I wish I tried. But we had some issues with that, didn't we?
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is what I was asking.
Yeah.
and again, Ben's not here, but this was his request. On-grid loaded is an event that we used to provide, we want to provide, and there's a development card for that eventually. But the idea is the page gets loaded and we need to do something to it before the user interacts with it. So on-grid loaded was that point. And it looks to me like your mutation observer is accomplishing what that, but since that's missing, we had to go into a more complex.
Yeah, and actually, come to think of it, this right here could probably be better defined. It's looking at the entire page, basically, for a change in the page, and that's what's kicking off the running of the function to set up the form control listeners. And this actually could probably be refined so that it's looking at we put a better path in here so that it's just looking at the listing itself. But I don't think it matters particularly, but.
So I'm watching the chat, and Matt says sounds like a good feature request. In other words, this should just be a checkbox in the setup that says warn if they leave.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
sure, that would be great. And maybe we can get there, but yeah, this is something that we can.
If you need this functionality now.
Yeah. And also, there's probably some different things that we could do here, like so for instance. So let me finish talking about the implementation. So this is not all. This is the primary JavaScript that drives the entire thing. But on this edit user data here, on the data source inline edit, there's a on complete. So once the
save is
once you've done your inline editing and you've saved your data, then it sets show exit warning defaults. So this is, and to be clear, that so this is the data source inline edit will put the grid into edit mode, but this on complete, these actions don't run until you click save. So that's so once you click save, it sets the exit warning defaults. And what I learned is also that these only run if you click save. They don't run if you click cancel. So so this wasn't working. That's why I had to put the event listener on the cancel button. So there's that, and then in the pop-up form, we have the text, which is just static, and then on the discard changes button, executing JavaScript and setting the show exit warning defaults. And then of course, on the continue editing, we're just closing the form pop-up. And so the show exit warning will stay as true. So that is, I believe, the complete setup. Matt has a question.
Yes. Could you go back to the code itself on the page? By the way, this is excellent. I very much could have used this, but I did some other workarounds. Yeah. Keep going. All right. So then you have, I think down at the bottom of this data source load refresh, you have document body, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So this is what's this is the observer. So this is is waiting for changes. Yep.
So my question is, what if there were multiple tables, multiple grids on the same page in tabs? Would that be looking at the whole, all of the entities, or would it just be looking at the active entity?
No, this is looking at the entire body of the page. So it's looking at the page for changes to happen. And that's what I was saying a minute ago, is that I think that this could be refined. And in that case, you probably would want to refine it down to the specific listing. So basically, you would have to observe you'd have to figure out a path to put here that would be looking at the HTML that occurs below the current listing.
Right. Okay. So you have to make that list specific.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So the other question I have is on the if the content is loaded dynamically, use mutant observer to detect changes. In what context do you mean content being loaded dynamically?
So it probably doesn't, you know, it's probably not that wording, that comment. Actually, I changed some of the comments, but that comment comes directly from my chat.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so it may not be the right wording specifically, but basically it's looking to see that what's happening here in this area of the page had some change, and that change is that. So now we've had a change. So now when I clicked edit user data, it saw that there was a change here, and it automatically kicked in to run the function that added the event listeners to each of these form controls.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, nice pattern that's out there. I think it paves the way for a lot of things. I mean, understanding how to target controls and what's going on. I'm guessing the same types of techniques could be used for trying to figure out if a form was dirty.
Yes, I'm sure. Yep, absolutely.
That's
All
very
right.
nice, Patrick.
There's no more questions.
Thanks.
I will take back and go to another topic. So this is the one that I threatened and halfway started, and here we go. One of our implementation team was using the load users action in the recent weeks, and stumbled into some of the implicit functionality that's part of load users, and I thought it was worth talking about. We're in a couple of ways. One, internally, we are improving the documentation, so at least you know that there's some things going on that weren't immediately evident to you. And then two, I thought I would just address, let's see what it is doing. So let's do load users. So oftentimes when we are explaining how to do things, we say, well, we need to use a load user action in this case. And let me add one just for illustration. The load user action, what it has is, well, what user identifier do you want to load? And so it tells you, and the reason that we often advise it is, let's say that that a workflow, I mean, this could happen anywhere, but let's say your workflow is running in response to an automation firing. The automation doesn't come in with a user ID, and so you might, I mean, it's running anonymously essentially. And so when this workflow runs, you might want to, you might need some privileges, like you might need to be a user that has the role of manager in order to be able to modify a table or to look at a table. And so you need more rights. And so load user for the same in the same way, it could be that you're running a workflow that does some work that the user may not have rights to do, but you want to let it happen anyway. So load user lets you just switch, and I'm not Dale anymore. I'm the administrator, and now I can do the things that I need to do. So that's we often advise that. Questions so far? So the thing that I wanted to show is load user is actually, in addition to elevating which is good functionality, there is there's kind of an incremental thing that's going on where you can have multiple users loaded into the context. And this is, again, a feature that's been in the product for a long time, and is maybe rarely used, so it's worth exploring. So I've got a load user action here, another one here, and then a send email action here. Let's see what the load user. I just picked a one of my user IDs on a user, yeah, by email. You can pick by email or user ID. There's several ID, username, or email is the way you can pick. But I'm doing a load user on this one user, and in that, immediately after that, I'm capturing the user's email address and putting it into email one. And when I'm all done, I'm going to output email one as the output, so you can see that it's doing, that it does this work. I'm following that up with the same thing, but a different user ID. The other one was X1, this is X2. So a different user ID, and once I complete that, same thing, email 2 gets the value of my user email. So loading user and saving the email address, loading the user, saving the email address. And then just to kind of complete the loop, email 0 is I'm capturing the user ID before I start. So when we run this, we've got 3 outputs, email 0, 1, and 2. If I run this and take a look at it, we can see that the context changes. It starts out as being my email address, and then after the load user, the first load user works, it's now showing that my context is a different email, and then finally a third email. And I could you know what, I like to experiment, so and make sure that it's completely clear. So let me do this. Also put the user ID here, so we can see that's changing as well. So we'll put it on each of these so that we can see it output. So the load user, when they run, it's going to pick, the user ID changes, the email changes. So I started as 2, then I became 62, then I became 63. So I don't think there's any big shock yet, but here's the thing. Send email action and some of our other actions have some things that use this, the result of load users. And so you've probably seen this checkbox. You probably have ignored it for a long time. There's a checkbox that says send me email to all users. And it tells you what it's going to do. Send email to all users from the context. And if you're using that checkbox, don't put anything into the to field. That's what it's saying. So the email that I'm sending, I'm using this checkbox. I'm not putting anything in. I have nothing in the to field, so the to is blank. And then the email has a subject that has the username and user ID, and the body includes the email address. And so the emails that result from this, it turns out that there are 2 emails that result from this, one to each of the load users, and that's the implicit functionality that you don't know that you're getting, and I wanted to point out. So my emails, I've run this twice now, and let me delete one time. So here's the 2 emails that we got out of one run, where it has the X1 user and the X2 user as part of this, and we've got the different user IDs and things like that. So that send email action with that checkbox ends up taking this load user and this load user and sending an email. Not the original user, but load user and this one. So maybe I'm back to, did everybody know this but me? Or is this new information? Hello, Don.
I first of all did not know it, and secondly, I'm a tiny bit confused. Does that mean that when you say to all users, it's not all users in your system, but rather all users in the context. So each
Yes.
load user is stacked on top of one another.
Yes.
Ah,
If you look at the help text for this, it kind of gives you a hint to all users from the context. So if you
I thought that load user 2 would overwrite load user 1. But you're saying that both users are now loaded.
Yes, and the last that's kind of this implicit thing that's going on and that we're trying to explain. When you do the first load user, your context is that user. So we did this one, and we are, from that point forward, we are this user. If we do another load user, from that point forward, when you refer to the user tokens, you're this user. But each of them got loaded into context. It's a list that you can't really see, but you did it explicitly by doing two different load users. And that list can be acted on by some actions like send email. So if you do send email and do this checkbox, all the users that you've loaded, not the original one, but all the ones that you've explicitly loaded, are going to get an email.
And Dale, the thing that is surprising me, even after having been involved in this internal discussion, is that the send email action, the emails that were sent, the user context token is unique to the two separate emails. So it's not looking at the user context that is
the final one.
Yeah, the final one. It's looking at the one that you at each of the ones that were in the list, and then the tokens within that email are specific to those that were in that list. That's cool.
Correct. So
yeah,
if you and knowing this, that opens
Yeah.
up the possibility that you can build an email that, add several users to your contacts, one more, 1 to 5, 50, and I'll show you 50 here in a minute. But and then when you send the email, each one is going to get personalized based on the user tokens. It
Yeah.
implicitly does that. So I wanted to make, there's always more, right? I wanted to make you aware that there's another load users action. This is the one that I was trying to wander into accidentally. Oh, and it's a forms only one, so it even makes it's crazier. Sorry. So let's go look at that. This is an action that only exists, well, it doesn't exist in workflows. We wandered into it with APIs, so that's help me write down that bug. So I guess we'll do it that way. We found it in APIs. We'll do it in APIs. And I'm just going to fast forward here, but there's this action that says, so we have the load user actions, and then there's this other one, load users from SQL. For some reason, it's not available in workflows. But what it says is you can run a SQL query here. It doesn't matter what your SQL is, but so long as it returns user IDs. Let's see what this is. So this gives you this is expecting a result of users to come out. The point is you could select users based on a where clause, and all of those would get added in bulk to your context. So you could select 50 users and then send an email to 50 users, one action. So instead of iterating through a loop, you it would do all of these that are in context for you kind of automatically. So
is your query there returning user ID? So you could have a pretty complex query that, looks at user profiles and things like that to get you that list of users, and as long as it returns user ID, it would work.
Yes.
But
So
likewise, though, if you went to an action like the send email action, all you would need is the user ID, because you any token that you can get data about a user using the ID, you'd be able to use it in that email. That's correct, right, Dale?
the core user ID token does have the ability to pick what user you want to
Yeah.
return. So there are many ways to just like we were talking earlier, many ways to code anything.
Yeah.
We're talking about the implicit one of load users, whether you loaded them one by one or used this load users from SQL action. The send email, if you checked that box, is going to consume that list automatically, and every time through every email that gets sent would be focused on a particular user, and I'm reasonably certain it's going to load all of the things. So even though we only returned user ID, it's going to give you all of the other
Mhm.
display name and email and everything by the time you get to the email. Now, as I mentioned, lots of different ways to do things. This is old functionality, been in the product for a long, long time, and there's probably better patterns to use that are more explicit. In other words, you could create a list from SQL and then use the for each action to iterate through, and you're far more in control of what list you're working through and what emails that you're sending. I just wanted you to be aware of this implicit functionality. And there's another reason that's important to know that. We used the send email action, which sent it to, each of these two load users. There's another action, and this is where it gets hairy. There's another action called delete user. Where is it? Here it is. User management, delete user. That doesn't ask for a user ID. And it has the ability to completely delete out a user, not even just marking was deleted, but making them gone. And if you look at the comment, it says deletes all users in the current context. So if you, and then, the explanation, it's defaults to the current user, but if you use load users, it's going to delete them. So this delete user action would delete both of these that we loaded into context. So it's important to understand that there's this, the current load user action is doing some things that, like delete user would do. There's also grant user role, and grant user role does prompt for a user, but if you leave it blank, it does it to everybody who's in the context. So there's these kind of implicit things going on, and so you just need to be aware of it. Okay. Part of that is just improving the help text that will, instead of saying that, when the load user action is present, we're going to be adding a lot more text that says, here's what's going on, that it might impact all the users, and you need to think about it just so that you don't accidentally do a load user and think it's only working on the last one. It could be working on, and like in the case of delete user, it would be working on all of them that you loaded. Okay, and now with all that explanation, we ran over. I had a whole other topic that we didn't get to, but that's another thing. We're going to do campfire games. I guess I'll announce that next week. So with that, thanks for hanging on, those of you that made it all the way to the end and past, and we will drop off from here in a few minutes and do Afterglow. See you next week.